this. So again, try copying and pasting into the browser if that doesn't work. If you can't find the information, do a little search, like it's a patent. Just search on the inventor or the patent number if it's in the link, or the title, which is in the spreadsheet on Google Patents. And if that doesn't get you there, then send me an email, and I'll get dug out of emails today, and I'll respond as quick as I can. I'll scan my emails. I'm kind of behind because of yesterday, but I'll scan for you guys. So just put in the subject line, business pitch, broken link or something, then I'll look at that sooner rather than later. Just FYI, I've come to learn this morning there are 2 teams that have already picked their intellectual property and their product concept, so if you guys haven't gotten on that, you're already behind. Remember that you've got 24 or 48 hours, so by tomorrow morning, you've got to know what you're doing with your IP. I don't know. I just learned about this morning. So I'm not going to call them out.
So if you do choose your intellectual property, let us know the technique of intellectual property you haven't chosen, because at the end of the 48 hours, we'll open up that intellectual property to other teams who may or may not like the 3 pieces that they have to look over. That will only happen after the first 48-hour period, and then you're really going to do it.
Yeah. So hopefully today will be very helpful in that regard. If you haven't had a chance to really look at your IP and get your team together around that, we've got Ford Kemper here who's going to talk to you guys about intellectual property. And then remember, later on this afternoon, you're going to meet with your team members, and so you can bounce some ideas and have discussion with them as well. Okay. Any other questions?
Sure. Yeah, for the web stream.
If anything comes up, we'll have time at the end during lunch. We can handle that stuff. So I'll turn it over to Ford and let him dig in.
Try not to yell into my mic. Hi, I'm Ford. I'm a business lawyer with a background in mergers and acquisitions, fundraising either on the company side as well as the investor side, and I've done a lot of IP licensing. I've been in-house in a public technology company with over 120 master's and PhD scientists and managed a portfolio of a couple hundred patents. But I'm not a patent lawyer, and the way I'm going to talk to you all today is from the perspective of what you are doing. You're going to in-license some patents, and you've got to go raise funds, and you're making a pitch. So I'm going to try to talk about what investors are going to be looking for. And Facebook had the 2 twins saying that it was their idea. From the very beginning, as an investor and their counsel, you want to make sure you don't have that situation. You want to make sure that a key part of the technology wasn't invented by somebody's buddy down the hall that was a mechanical engineer that just helped out for fun. Because that might mean he's a co-inventor, and I'll talk more about that. The second thing is all of your scenarios is what I call your in-licensing technologies from one of these universities. All these universities negotiate their licenses differently, but the first thing I'm going to do is investors counsel is I'm going to say, I want to read that thing. We'll talk about that in a moment. They're not magic. They are not necessarily enforceable until you win in court against an infringer. Until then, you don't know whether an application is going to get all the claims. You don't know whether an issued patent is going to be enforceable when you end up in a courtroom. So anything at the beginning? Okay. All right. So when I talk about making sure the IP is in the company from the beginning, they usually have a larger section called putting the right agreements in place right away. But we can cover that very quickly. I've got to get better at this, don't I? Is there a secret? Let's see. Here we go. All right. So the biggest thing you want to have is for everyone involved in starting your company is to get what I call confidentiality and ownership of IP agreements put in place. And the big reason is that you've got to own your own confidential information. You've got to own your own trade secrets. So if you figure out a way to use or apply this patent that you're in licensing, you need to make sure that you're keeping it a secret and then the people that you have can't talk about it or disclose it. And a big part of that is making clear that your company owns any IP that's developed. And that's most important at the beginning, because a lot of times startup companies don't have employees yet. It's a bunch of people getting together to start a company. They may not have payroll. They may not have any money. So if you don't have an agreement that says the company owns the IP, your friend down the hall that helped out on a mechanical engineering problem may be a co-inventor on your technology. And what that means is they would have non-exclusive, unlimited rights to the invention. So when I come in as investors counsel, I want to make sure that anyone that touched your technology had some sort of agreement in place that makes sure that shows that the company owns all the IP. Because one of the big pitfalls is you don't have to pay someone for them to own stuff. You know, if you go talk to if you tell your uncle at a barbecue about some of the secret sauce of your technology, all of a sudden that may no longer be a trade secret. You may have lost the ability to protect your technology. Likewise, again, just because someone helps you out on something, even though you don't pay them, doesn't mean that the company owns the IP. Does that make sense? In some cases, yeah.
I was just wondering, if patents are already been filed, and now that we're a first to file country instead of a first to invent country, right, then shouldn't the people who filed it have ownership over the IP, or how does that work?
Right, but if you're pulling together a team to apply an unlicensed patent, one, you may come up with software, you may come up with other patentable inventions on specific applications of the unlicensed technology, or just know-how. And I have all sorts of things, but a license is just a right to use something. So I always give an example of someone could buy a license to fly F-15 planes over South America, an exclusive license. They have no idea how to build a F-15 plane. They may have no idea how to fly an F-15 plane. It's just a right to use. So you're going to in-license this technology. But one of the things I'm going to initially ask investors, what makes me think your team has any idea how to take advantage of it? Do you have the expertise to apply it? A patent is just the beginning of the ability to solve problems. It's a right to do something, but your team is going to have to figure out how to do it for your commercial application. And that means either getting one of the scientists on board that was involved in original technology, a professor, say, at George Mason, or maybe making sure your team has the expertise to apply it. So when you talk about that at your pitch, even if you have to oversell yourselves, don't come in having no idea. For your purposes, you can BS a little bit, right? Because this is a sales process. So make sure your team has the expertise to apply the technologies that you're in licensing. Even if part of your pitch is we've tracked down the professor at UVA and he's agreed to be a consultant on us at $200 an hour. But you've got to be able to apply it, because just getting a license doesn't get you anything. It does, but if I had a license any of the things I clicked through on your portfolio, I'd be hopeless, right? Because I'm a liberal arts guy. So that's very important. Did that answer that? Why that's important going forward?
Sort of. That's a really good point that I hadn't thought of. But I was really wondering, I guess what you're trying to say is if something's already been filed, that's going to be protected no matter who you talk to about it, right? But then the problem arises if you talk to people about other stuff you haven't necessarily filed yet, new IP that could be developed in the company.
That's right. It may be that the patentable invention only works within a certain temperature band, and you figure that out pretty quickly through trial and error. Or maybe the professor you pay as a consultant tells you that. Or again, maybe it's for using a protein for certain types of uses, but when you go to apply it to what you think is the most profitable application, that may itself be patentable, right? So all those things are going to matter quite a bit. But back from another licensee, you might want to have access to it. That gets a little advanced. The ability to sub-license. So if you're a company that I invested in you, one of the ways you're going to make money is you may do a sub-license to Philips Medical, and they may make certain payments to you. So your ability to sub-license without restriction and without undue hoops is pretty important, because Philips Medical is going to come in and say, I'm not going to develop my next generation medical device relying on your technology unless my sub-license and your license are absolutely bomb-proof. Because no one's going to develop a next generation oil drill using your technology if it could go away, or like an F-35 plane. That's why people like that want to make sure we're not going to build this technology into our next generation plane and then have it go away. So that's what I talk about. When you look at that license, you want to be able to say, in your pitch, we had our counsel look at the in license, and it's bomb-proof, whatever terminology you want to use, but we know we can't, we can control making sure we don't lose it. We're not going to lose it because of some technicality. When you're negotiating with the UVAs, VTIPs of the world, apparently UVA is pretty big on taking equity in your company versus royalty rates, so maybe 6% royalty if you have no equity, or if you give them 10% of your company, maybe it's 3%. I'm not sure. And then, of course, there's all sorts of royalties and fees. Percentage of sub-licensing revenue is how they make their money. And all these university licensing offices are different. But from your point of view, you want to make sure you've got great rights, total flexibility. You don't owe I don't want to invest in your company if you owe VTIP $250,000 a year minimum royalty starting in 6 months, right? So if you do a bad deal getting your in license, it's going to scare off investors. An investor will come in sometimes and start a renegotiation with VTIP, but to do that, they've got to be pretty darn interested in your product. So that part's important. And some of these university offices love to negotiate. The UVA patent office guy used to have a PowerPoint presentation all about negotiating with all sorts of tricks, like the gambler's three-way fold or something like that. So it's not always easy negotiating with some of these university offices, but I think VTIP's pretty good, and they've generally gotten better. Another trick is that universities sometimes have already paid for the patenting costs. Sometimes they haven't. You want to make sure, universities generally want to be reimbursed or be making money to pay for the patenting costs. The only thing I'll say here, and I'll talk more about patents in foreign countries, but you don't want the university office to have a complete blank check on where they do patents. They go if they have a blank check to just go do a patent filing and prosecution in Japan, you don't want to all of a sudden get billed for $110,000 having not expected it and built it into your financials. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. The other thing is assignability. And an M&A lawyer, I'm always thinking about this because that's the most common exit. And by the way, when you talk in your pitch contest as an investor, I want to hear how you're going to make money and how you're going to make me money. So don't tell me you're going to be working on this for 35 years because I'm dead in 35 years. They want to get their money back in, say, 5 to 10, 7 or 8 years. So a big part of what you need to do is be explaining to them, here's what our exit is. We think we're going to, at this point in development, we're either going to do a sub-licensing deal to a big pharma, or they're going to acquire us for this much money. Well, they're not going to acquire you if your license isn't assignable. So that's just something in the license says you can assign it to someone that buys your business, or the business division to which the license relates. So that's critical, because if you don't have that, you're not going to invest in the business unless that's the case. Any questions on that? Okay.
All this talk about licensing, generally universities want to own the patent and license it versus just sell it outright for all these reasons. You can also do an option to license. You can also do an option to license, which is a much shorter agreement where you say, all right, if we pay $5,000 up front, or if we pay up to $10,000 of patenting costs, you have a 6 months option to enter into the license, negotiate with VTIP or UVA. That's a good way to make sure you've locked up the technology without spending too much money. Or you're investigating whether you even pursue it as a commercial endeavor. So that's something you could say to investors as your pitch. You say, well, we have an option within 6 months. So we've husbanded our money. We haven't committed ourselves to something until we are 6 months down the line. As an investor, depending on early stage, that may be better than knowing you have a patent license already in place with predetermined royalties and things like that. That's just something to think about. Intellectual property, I'm going to go pretty quickly here, because a lot of this you know already, but intellectual property is intangible personal property. Literally speaking, it's knowledge, is information, inventions that give you a competitive advantage. There's different types of IP, the trademarks, service marks, that's just branding the product or service so the public equates your quality to that brand. Copyrights is just writing a song, essay, creating an art, writing software, it's an expression of an idea. Trade secrets are really pretty critical. It's, again, how you build the F-15 plane, how you fly the F-15 plane, that's all trade secrets. That's not something you know because you get an in-licensed patent. So it's critical that you know how to apply this in-licensed technology. Again, I would address that just very briefly when we talk about how it is you've got the expertise to apply these in-licensed patents. You then have a business plan to commercialize. And then, of course, patents. And again, I'm not a patent lawyer, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Is that clock right?
It's a little fast.
Okay. But I'm sort of flying
Yeah, it's
through it
15
because I don't want to be the guy that goes over. But any questions y'all want to ask right now, especially as you think about your task at hand and doing this pitch contest in, I guess, November 17th? Any IP questions, just generally as you prepare and you go to pick your patent? Okay. So patent literally is in the U.S. Constitution. It's a monopoly that's granted to incentivize people, not inventivize, incentivize people to invent. Three types of patents. Utility patents is what everyone's talking about when they talk about patents. And that length is 20 years from the effective filing date. There's also design patents and patents for plans. This is just the statutory definition of what is a patentable invention. Whoever invents or discovers a new or useful process, etc., or improvement may obtain a patent subject to conditions, requirements, or title. Real quick, I do agreements all the time using the terminology patentable invention. Government contracts, STTRs, SBIRs are often going to be the first thing the spin-off company from the Research Institute does. They all have the definition of patentable invention about what your reporting obligations to government. If you work in a big company, they'll have internal IP policies that say you have a patentable invention. But you'd be surprised how complex the question is. Maybe not something like Rob who's done it
For years and years. But what is a patentable invention is not the easiest thing in the world to figure out. It has to be non-obvious so that the difference between the claimed invention and the prior art are such the claimed invention as a whole would not have been obvious before the effective filing date of the claimed invention to which a person having ordinary skill in the art to which the claimed invention pertains. So this is pretty technical, but just goes into what is a patentable invention. In your situation, you've already in-licensed at least a patent application. You're not going to be, your investors aren't going to want to hear in a pitch about obviousness or novelty and things like that. But it's all a part of what makes something patentable. It's part of the patent process. You have a duty to disclose prior art. Rob's probably described prior art better than I could, but prior applications and what have you of the technology. But for example, you have a duty to disclose prior art. So let's say you have this great issued patent that you're in licensing. Well, what if the patent lawyer and George Mason hadn't disclosed all the prior art as a part of the patenting process? You go to sue an infringing competitor, and then you lose in court on some of those claims because they hadn't disclosed all the prior art. So one of the things, as you talk to investors, is especially at the get-go, one of the things you may want to say is you've done your due diligence to make sure that you believe that you've gone back through the patent filing. I mean, not that many people actually do this, but this would be very thorough, so why not say you did it? It's a part of this hypothetical. But going back through the patent file, making sure, maybe hired a patent attorney to evaluate it before you in-license it, Because when you go to in-license a patent from a university, you're kind of like an investor as well, right? You want to make sure that, just like the investor wants to make sure, that you're in-licensing a valid patent that will be able to give a monopoly in the future. So, again, you have total control, I believe, as part of what you say is your pitch contest. You're not actually have to pay out $12,000 to your cousin to do a patent evaluation, patent search. So if I were y'all on the 17th, I'd say before we decide to do this in-license, we did an evaluation of it. We believe the patent file shows that they, disclosed everything. There's no reason to think it's invalid. Blah blah blah. Oh, and you had a lawyer review your patent in-license. This is just talking about prior art. Enablement, the purpose is to describe the invention so that one skilled in the art can make and use the invention to ensure that the invention is a communicated to interested public in a meaningful way. Of course, the common sense version of this is that's the trade of getting a patent versus keeping it a secret, like the Coke formula, is they give you this limited monopoly period, but you're supposed to describe your invention in enough detail so that after that monopoly period, it's open to the public and the greater good. Does that make sense? So evaluating a patent, and any questions so far, and I'll jump into evaluating a patent. And investors all over the board when it comes to what they do to evaluate a patent. If you got Philips Medical, they're going to have in-house patent lawyers, they're going to have all sorts of scientists. Their scientists are really going to be the ones that evaluate whether this technology, whether your patent is good, whether the technology is good. They're the ones that are going to have familiarity of who's doing what all around the world to know what they don't know. And then they'll have their patent lawyers look at it, they'll look at the licenses in detail. Whereas early stage investor might not even hire a patent lawyer to do an evaluation. Again, the more money at stake, the more professional the investors, the heavier duty their due diligence level will be. There's a lot of patent monetization or patent advisory firms. So if you're an investor, professional investor, you may come in and have a firm do a professional evaluation and do a written report on the value of these patents. So, or you could have someone come in and invest $2 or $3 million, and they don't do anything more than skim the same thing you got links to as a part of your class materials. It really varies all over the place. But in general, investors, as you might imagine, they want the broadest and longest monopoly. Again, the monopoly period is going to start and last 20 years from the effective filing date. So as you look at your hyperlinks, most of those, or many of those links talk about an expired date. And what does having the broadest monopoly mean? It just means having broad claims. So someone like me in the corporate world, I can't evaluate how broad a claim is or how good it is. But what you would want to do, talking to the investors as part of your pitch, is say that we evaluated and we believe that this is nice technology, these patents have some very broad claims that would give us monopoly pricing, and other companies and competitors can design around it. If it's a narrow claim, someone can just say, do something with 3 wires, have 2 wires, and you don't have a monopoly. So when I say broad, it means that it's hard to design around, hard for your competitors to compete with you because of the breadth of your patent claims. Now, all patents, we hear patent, the very lowest level, least mature patent is what's called a provisional patent application. And that can just be a short form application. There's nothing more than a paragraph on a page. Or it could be basically the same thing as a full patent application and 25 pages written by a PhD. Again, for what you're in licensing, a provisional patent application, just a paragraph filed, may be worthless. Whereas a 20-pager written by a PhD or somebody like Rob that's almost certainly ready for prime time, that may be almost good as a full application. But in terms of what you're in licensing, in terms of what an investor's looking at, that's important. The other thing is until a patent issues, an investor can't count on an application. They don't know what claims are going to be approved or not. And that's not even true for an issued patent application. Until you win in court, you may have claims that are later held to be invalid. So that's all part of evaluating how strong it is, how likely you think it'll be to be enforced. Obviously, one advantage of an older patent is less prior art. Obviously, the disadvantage is a shorter monopoly period. And one thing I'll mention, because some of y'all, I looked, again, I went through your spreadsheet, but not all of them, obviously. Some are just applications, some are issued patents. It is kind of tricky to in-license a patent application because you don't know what claims you're going to issue. You don't know whether it's a 6%, a monopoly worthy of a 6% royalty, or whether it's something that is not very broad and can be designed around. Maybe it's only worth a 2% royalty. So, if you decide to do your pitch based on some applications, I would want to know that you've even done more due diligence to make sure that you think it's going to issue and that you're going to win the good claims. And me personally, maybe not your 7-minute audience, I'd want to know that, oh yeah, if we don't get all the claims we want, the royalty scales down. So maybe we're paying UVA 6% if we get everything, and by the way, we invested 5%, or maybe it drops down to 1.5% if we only get 3 out of 8 claims. Does that make sense? So that's something tricky about applications.
How do you know how many claims you get? Do you have to wait until you have to defend it in court?
Yeah, the application will have a number of claims, and then when it gets issued, they'll allow certain of them and not all of them. So let's say you start with 13, and I'm speaking abstractly. Let's say you started with 13 application, they allowed 11. And if you had some expert come in and say, I think all 11 are good, or sometimes they'll say, I like this patent, claims 9 and 2 are stretches. So, but that's a good question. And again, that's why it's hard to in-license an application. So think through that. If you're going to go give a pitch on something that's just an application, talk more about how you're prepared for if some claims fall away, or say that you've done the due diligence that you know that the claims. International patent rights. Again, this gets very technical. Even having run a patent department with a budget of $400,000 or $500,000, I had trouble keeping track of all this. But in the bio area, international is very important. So you must file a PCT application within 12 months of filing a U.S. patent. There's some advantages starting with U.S. patent. You can just skip the U.S. patent and just do a PCT, of which you can then nationalize to the U.S. So PCT then allows you to go after other countries within that time period. As he talked about, there's a 1-year statutory bar through most of the world. But for international patent rights, the most important thing for you to think about is that these big pharma companies and the Philips Medicals of the world, they want to sell into Turkey. They want to sell into Brazil. They want to sell into Japan. And so if you want to get to the big home run and have the big pharmas pay a lot of money to do business with you, you've got to locked up the world in which they're selling. So they want Australia. They may want India. So that can be very expensive. Just Japan can be $100,000 with all the translation. So if I were you and you've got something you think that could be a big hit as a part of your pitch, explain how, again, you can make up your own rules a little bit. You could say, well, Virginia Tech for 0.5% more royalties is going to front all these international patent costs. Now, they may or may not be realistic. Or you can say, listen, the part of what we're looking for funding at is because we know the most likely buyers or licensors or sub-licensors of our technology, we know they're selling into South America and Asia and Australia. And you might say, and to go into all those countries, maybe $250,000. Whereas US and Canada might be $25,000, $30,000. But if I were you going for selling a big home run, I'd talk about how you've protected all these markets that the big pharmas want to have monopoly pricing in.
So as a licensor, are you allowed to file for a PCT, or would that have to go through the original patent?
And that's a good question. I think it varies on the personalities in the university patent office. So they may either want to keep the right, you may have the right. People like UVA only want you to use their lawyers, but you can negotiate through that. So I think that's all negotiable.
But if you were to secure a PCT for yourself, would you then own that patent in the international market?
No, they'd ultimately be the owner in most cases. And that went to the slide I guess I skipped over too quickly, where universities like to keep ownership of a patent. and just stay a licensor. And as to your terminology, you're a licensee, and when you do another deal with Phillips Medical, then you're a sub-licensor. Phillips Medical is the licensee. But this is where a lot of the money goes. U.S. patents, again, can be 5 to 25 grand, varies a lot, but international is where the big budget comes in. And I think I got it. So, but please ask, any questions? I know they'll let you ask questions.
Because, you know, many of you have seen your patents, and believe me, Ford is very expensive, so you're gonna get some.
Oh my God.
Can you recap on the option and how that is an option instead of?
Yeah. So an option with UVA Patent Foundation might be a 2-page agreement that's as simple as saying, here's the patent, and you agree not to market it or license to anyone for 6 months. So for 6 months, I have exclusive right to negotiate a patent license with you. And you have to be reasonable with each other. And for that, we reimburse $7,500 of patent costs. And that's just obviously, because there's a lot of people that want it, it's more expensive. If they can't find anybody that wants it, it's not as expensive.
So that essentially just locks down the negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like going to your buddy and saying, I'll pay you $20 if you give me 6 months exclusive right to buy your mountain bike. And it's just the same idea.
So I don't really, for the pitch competition itself, I know we only have like 7 minutes, but you covered a lot of the great content. But when it comes in terms of what we should present specifically, and especially in the eyes of investors, what do you think some key points that investors might want to hear? This is like some important, like let's say 2 or 3 things to be sure to mention.
Well, I mean, I would, of course, I like hearing this stuff, but I'd have one team member say something as quick as this. Everyone on our team we have agreements with, making sure the company owns all the IP, controls all the flow of confidential information. Before even in-licensing this patent from UVA, we did an evaluation of how strong it is, and with a consultant, with a proper agreement, we paid him $2,200 to evaluate the technology, so we know it has strong and broad claims. We reviewed the patent file, we think they're going to be enforceable, and then we use an attorney to negotiate the patent and license with UVA, so it's rock solid. We know if we end up getting a deal with Big Pharma, we know that we're not going to have a problem with this patent falling away. And we also made sure that the royalties payable to VTIP are such that they're not going to be a problem eventually doing a deal with someone else. We went into this application, that's when you said, listen, we really did some homework to make sure we think we're going to get these claims. And I'd say, and we evaluated, we believe there's a broad claim, so it gives broad monopoly pricing. And again, we've got some control of the facts. And I'd probably say, we believe these claims are broad enough that even if we pivot and slightly address another market, which we know happens as you learn more, these claims are going to be broad enough to give us monopoly pricing, even if we pivot somewhat 6 months down the road. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I would add the comment that I think it's safe to say that most of these tech transfer offices have not done almost any of this. They get an invention disclosure, and they're looking, maybe doing a kind of a superficial patentability assessment, but they're not looking at it from the perspective of a licensee. So they're not going to dig into it as deep. So that's your obligation to do as the licensee. It's sort of buyer beware. They're not going to make any representations on a patent application that they're going to get the claims, that the claims are going to be enforceable. They just basically say, this is what it is, but we're not guaranteeing any of it. So you guys will have to do that. Is that your experience, Ford, that the tech transfer offices don't dig in like a business would when they're looking at doing their diligence?
I think that's right. I'm not an expert at it, but I think they do. They're not going to spend $5,000 to patent it without having some basis for a belief that it's going to be worth spending the $5,000 on. But no, that's really your job to do that homework and do that evaluation. So again, and I'd say this to investors, when it came to getting this in license, like you, we did an evaluation of how strong the patent was, how broad the claims are, and explain why, how you believe it was worth getting that in license. And for those same reasons, You, the investor, can feel confident that this is going to give us monopoly pricing if our business idea succeeds. So, thanks, everybody.
Okay, we're gonna do something during my portion of this morning. I want everyone to stand up, grab your personal belongings, and I want you to find your team, and I want you to sit with your team. All right, so do it quick. You gotta have all in. Thank you.
Trying to see if I can get your display to mirror, but I think now if I bring this back up. Okay.
And here, I can just go mirror.
Yeah, I have to see if you can.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we would pick up the adapter. I always forget where it is on a Mac. I've got one that I never use.
That's all good.
Cool.
All right, everyone's in their teams. Sweet. I'm not going to use the lavalier because it's the battery's slowly dying on it. Some of you were here for my presentation yesterday. Some of you weren't. Any questions about feasibility analysis? Who wants to take a quick pop quiz? What are the 4 aspects of a feasibility analysis? It can't be someone in my class.
Financial one.
Yep.
What about consumers, whether they want it?
Target market.
Target market. Whether you can do it, was that one organization?
Organizational. Yep.
And there's a fourth?
There is a 4th, right? Industry attractiveness is going to be part of the market analysis. Okay. I already got financial.
Resource, like,
Organization.
or
Yeah. The first one is product and service feasibility. And remember, I also mentioned that could be also relabeled as technology feasibility. Can you actually build this? Okay, so today we've got to talk about finances and how you build a pro forma. I want to be really, really explicit that I'm going to teach to the test on this, but this is something that literally every person should know. And I'm that passionate about it that I'm going to make that declaration. I believe that students should learn 2 things. They should learn personal finance, how to manage their own finances, and that every person should learn business finances, and this is Business Finances 101, right? And so I'm going to take you through a couple core principles on business finances. And again, I want this to be a discussion, so if there's questions that you have, please raise your hand and let me know, because I've got to get through this pretty quickly. There's quite a few principles. These will be posted, so again, if you need to refer to them, there are algorithms, there are equations in here that I want to make sure that you can refer back to. All right, so there's a couple things that when you're building your finances for your business that you're trying to prove to yourself and to your investors. One is your profitability. Are you able to make a profit at some number of goods or services sold? When is that? When are you going to make a profit? You heard Ford talk about the timeline. He talked about in between 5 and 10 years is when investors are expecting to get their return on investment. And so you have to be able to prove that out through in a detailed way of saying this is when we're going to make profit, right? Liquidity, ability to meet short-term financial obligations. So you have to have liquid capital that you can expense on certain operational needs, right? Efficiency. This is really critical. How productively a firm utilizes its assets, right? So what that means is investors want to know, how are you going to spend this money? And on next Friday, everyone's going to want to understand, if you win this money, what are you going to use it for? Are you going to try to advance this product? Are you going to try to take it to market? And then if you are, what are some other things? What are some other next steps that you want to do? And they want to know how, this is where I get into firms as an investor. I will ask firms, how frugal are you? Right? Everyone, how many of you have seen like Silicon Valley, the show on HBO? Right? Pretty elaborate like experience that they have, right? They have, you know, they have food catered all the time, and it's not necessarily like a true startup environment. And investors don't mind that you indulge in some of those things. But again, you got to be frugal, and they want to know how you're going to utilize your assets and your cash. I should add cash up there. So your stability, your overall financial health, your debt to equity ratio, all right? So I won't go into depth on that right now, but we'll hit a couple other pieces. Okay, so if you don't have sales, you have to be able to forecast on good faith estimates based on early tests and betas and industry averages, and you have to build out a plan saying, if we went to market, here are the sales and here are the sales projections of our medical device, of our biologic, or of our pharmaceutical. Okay? So day one, you're not going to have sales. You're going to have to build a team. You're going to have to get out there and sell. And your investors are going to say, you know what, when are you going to break even and when are you going to be profitable? And this, you have to make an assumption sheet, which equates to a pro forma, what's called a pro forma. So if someone in the judging panel says, can you tell me a little bit about your pro forma? They're talking about your financial projections over years. And I'm going to show you some. So here's why assumptions are important. Okay? They're truly guesswork. How many of you watch Shark Tank? You're like, yeah, we're raising $150,000 on an $18 billion valuation. Where does the valuation come from? Right, how do you build a valuation? And we'll talk a little bit about that. But assumptions, in my opinion, are super, super critical in the world of business, because savvy investors will spend more time reviewing single assumption sheet than they will spend reviewing all other financials combined. Okay, why? Why would they look at your assumptions versus your current situation? Yep.
Most likely to be different than reality.
Yeah. Right? Do they care about where you are right now, right in this moment? Not really. They care about where you're going. Oops. So if the assumptions are not credible, the entire plan and financial feasibility for new venture is called into question. This is why this program, I love it so much, is because it's helping you all pull together and build a financial feasibility, build a plan to show how you're going to make money with the intellectual property that you choose. If that is not right and not done in the right way, and it's called into question by the judges, it's going to be really difficult for you to win. So this is why this is so important, is because they want, the judges and real investors in real life are going to want to see you build out those projections, and they're going to want to see those assumptions. Now, assumptions should be fairly conservative. Again, I just used the Shark Tank example. We're entering a $25 billion industry. Yeah, it might be true, but is it really? I talked about sub-industries yesterday. and how you need to be prepared to get into some industries so that your assumptions are a little bit more credible. And so the industry might be tapered down to, a $2 billion industry because it's very focused, it's very finite. And here's how many firms are in that industry right now. Sorry, my shoes are squeaky on this floor here. It's fun. All right, so we're going to talk about 4 pieces of finances: sales forecast, income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flows. We've already talked a little bit about, we're going to talk a little bit about sales forecasting right now and how you pull that together. Okay, so the considerations of a sales forecast is to always look at the price of your product or service. Okay, so where's one of the teams? Elise, your team, you guys have chosen your intellectual property. Is that correct? How do you figure out what the price of your product or service is?
Looking at comparative markets or research.
Good. What else? Yeah.
You need to look at your cost of goods sold. Have to sell above that.
Well done. Well done. We'll get into that. So that's perfect. All right. So you're going to look at the price of your product or service, do some comparable analysis. Who else is in the industry that's building something similar, and how much does it cost them, and how much are they selling it for? Right? And again, I'll have some equations here in a minute. Considerations: you need to look at external factors such as population and demographics. How big, and this bleeds right into feasibility that I was talking about yesterday, bleeds into your target market. How big is the market? Is it 30 million? Is it 30 billion? And how do you know? And how do you make a very credible estimate and assumption on how big your market is? And how do you provide data to show that? Number of sites, locations, platforms. What that means is how big is your distribution channel going to look like? Okay. Who's going to manufacture it? Where's it going to go? How's all that going to work? Conversion rates, visitors to purchase, revisit, and repurchase. That's something we won't spend a ton of time on, but want to touch on it. So your job as a startup is to get sales. So you go through, you build your R&D plan, you get regulated approval, you have your intellectual property, it's licensed or it's patented, and you have a team, and you've done your feasibility analysis, and you're ready to go to market. Your number one job as a startup company is to get sales. If you don't get sales, you are not a good startup company, right? If you can't sell your product,
So,
you're going to be in trouble.
as an addendum to that, because you're startup companies, and one of your goals may well be to get to the point that you're acquired, your goal may well be to get sufficient investment to get the goals completed that will allow you to get to the point of being acquired. So that's an important aspect as well. It may be that your company never actually makes sales.
True.
The sale is the sale of the company.
That's right. And that's very, very industry specific in healthcare. There's a lot of that happens, especially with pharmaceuticals and biologics, medical devices as well, right? You turn a product into an actual product and service that solves a real problem and has a niche in a market. To Rob's point, you may never sell the actual product, but another company may come in and say, you know what, we want that, and we're going to purchase it, and then we'll sell it. And it's a great way to make lots and lots of money if you do it right. All right, so when you think about this, you want to convert your idea or technology into a usable product or service. So it has to be usable. For it to be acquired, it's typically going to need to be at that phase where it can enter market, no matter if you're going to sell it to consumers or if you're going to sell it to another business. Convert your product or service into real users. You want people to actually use your product. Convert users into customers. Convert customers into referrals and repeat business. All right, so that's a little bit of the sales pipeline and the sales forecasting. Key metrics, data points used to measure performance and progress improvement in your customer life cycle are really coming down to these 5 pieces down here: acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. This is something that downstream, if you were all to truly take something to market, this would be something that would be really, really important to pitch to your investors. Not something that you're going to need to dive in a whole lot for this project, but just, again, key pieces of information you need to understand is that you have to acquire customers, you have to activate them, you need to give them a user experience where you're going to retain them, then you convert them and you generate revenue from their sale, and then if they have a good experience, they're going to refer people to use your product, right? How many of you have used Uber? Okay. How many of you had a good experience with Uber? How many of you would say you had a not good experience with Uber? Okay. And so what is your likelihood of referring Uber to a friend? Specifically, why I use that example is because that is a way to forecast your sales and your experience. You want to give the best product and the best experience to your customers. If not, they're not going to refer others to you. So a couple tips: monthly forecast for the first year, then quarterly for 3 years following. Okay, does that make sense? So you're going to forecast your revenue for the first year on a monthly basis. So there's going to be 12 sections on a spreadsheet, January through December, of your sales forecast. And then the 3 years after that are going to be quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Okay. Use a unit-driven approach. Whatever, we'll talk about that. It's more of like what is the specific cost of the unit. Finding existing product to use as a guide or comparable. Elise, this is what you were alluding to earlier, is that you're going to look at your industry and you're going to say, all right, here's the firm that is closely related to what we're doing. Let's use them as a North Star and a guide, because their cost of goods sold, or how much it costs to build the product, is X, and we really like that cost, and we think we can get there maybe even lower. And then the revenue that they're charging and the money that they're making is really, really great. Let's use this firm as our guide in our example. Forecast prices is a separate variable versus volume of sales. Okay, so your pricing and your pricing variables need to be very specific of your cost per good, your cost per unit. Your volume of sales is how much you forecast doing over a period of time, right?
Should the sales forecast begin when we first expect sales, or just when a company is ready?
So when you think about pricing and how to make sales, you have to price something before you sell it, right? And so why you focus on the prices as a separate variable versus the volume of sales is because you need to know exactly how much you're going to charge for a product before you take it to market.
So not the price, for the actual forecast.
For the forecast, you should be doing a per unit sales forecast. So monthly, you're going to say we're going to sell this many units for this price.
If we're not expecting sales for a number of years, because
I'll show you. Yep. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of firms operate what we call the red. So they're actually spending more money than they're making because there's a ramp up cycle in every sales cycle. Right? You can't just go out day one. You can't. But in this industry, very difficult to start day one. You're going to either have to have investment from venture capital, bank, loan, grant, whatever it might be. And so you're going to operate in the red. And so you're going to be actually spending more than the money you're bringing in. So I'll hit that in just a little bit, Glenn, but that's a good question. All right, sales forecast, again, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but top down, estimate the total number of potential users of a product or service.
There a question over here?
Oh, yes.
Sorry. So if we decide that our most profitable end goal will be acquisition,
Yeah.
how should we tackle that?
Very good. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll show you an example of how you would build that into, into play to an extent. And I have some online, some examples that Mark and Rob and I pulled together for Excel spreadsheets of 2 different models that you build in terms of your forecast. Because what your investors are going to want to see either way is they're going to want to see your run rate, your burn rate. So your burn rate is how much money you are spending versus how much money you're making, right? And so you'll just want to make sure that as you build out that plan, that you have some of those questions answered and that you can showcase what that looks like. Okay, so you want to estimate the average price and what percentage of total market will use your product or service. And so again, that's going to give you the number of your total market. And again, be realistic. James Ramey, who just walked in the room, is from the Virginia Tech Caribbean Innovation Fund. We sit in a lot of pitches and we see a lot of different companies that have these mind-blowing numbers, and then you kind of dig into it and you're like, that's just not real. It's just not going to happen. Those sales are not going to happen, or that number of acquisition is not going to happen. And so you lose credibility when you do that. So you got to hit the fine line of being like too conservative on your financials, and then also just being too forthright and a little too aggressive with that. Okay, bottom up. Bottom up is definitely the way that not a ton of firms do this, but estimate the total number of actual users of a product or service and an average price. It's really hard to do. It's not very accurate. So top down is typically how I would focus that. Casing comparable firms is something super credible. So if you're starting a new venture fitness drink, why not go spend a day and examine what the tropical smoothie is doing at the local mall, so you can get an idea of who your consumers might be, what their spending habits are, what else are they purchasing when they're going to purchase a smoothie, all of those pieces. So the way you might look at doing that is if you are looking at a new method to administer dialysis, you might go to a dialysis lab here in Roanoke or in Blacksburg and ask them if you can come and watch them administer these tests and understand the back-end financials of how much are they charging, how are they charging insurance, and how much are they charging for insurance, and how many people do they have coming in on an average day, right? Those are things that you can do within 10 days, right? You have the time to do that, and you have connections here where you'll be able to do that. I highly, highly recommend doing that. It'll be so much more polished if you can walk into the room in front of the judges and say, you know what? We went and we spent a day with X company, and here's what we learned. It was really awesome, and it helped us build this forecast. And then industry trade information, this is good as well. Lots of information. So there are trade associations for almost anything out there. There are trade associations for medical devices, for specific medical devices, for pharmacology, for biologics. So look at trade associations, and they have a lot of data, a lot of reports that they showcase how big markets are and how to break into these markets. So trade associations are a good way to help you with forecasting your sales. So when you're looking at your pro forma statement, you'll have a sales forecast, you'll have a description, analysis, or analogy, and you'll have key by product, so the cost of goods sold and your break even. Okay, so cost of goods sold, back to our man over here. All right? I should have not put that slide up and asked you what cost of goods sold are. But cost of goods sold are materials and direct labor needed to produce the good or service. How much money did it cost to manufacture X product? So pretty important to get pretty accurate on that number. If you sell a pen for $100, it costs $40 to produce, materials and direct labor, and your cost of goods sold is $40. Okay? So how would you find cost of goods sold in your markets? Some of the intellectual property you've been assigned. Yeah? How could you figure that out?
Could you do research on how much the manufacturing costs are?
Yes. But how would you do that?
You know, let's go back to the company they purchased it from.
Okay, so if you, we use the dialysis, right? So you're doing some dialysis testing, and there is a dialysis testing clinic here in Roanoke. Do you think they have that figured out? They should, right? So could you go and talk to them about how much their medical equipment costs and how much they pay for it? Trade associations, like I just mentioned, or some other ways. Yep.
Well, if you're considering like an application to find out how much like the rest of the testing will cost you contact like one of the contract research organizations, find out how much additional research will cost you.
Good.
Through FDA regulations.
Okay. Okay, so materials and direct labor to manufacture a product or to build a product or your cost of goods sold. There's a lot of different ways that you can find this information. All right, so it is really open question to help you understand that. Find it and figure it out any way that you can. Back here.
Possible, like, talking to patients and asking, like, dialysis, for example, like, how much they, like, spend their money on it to try to figure out, like, you know, like, doing a less cost of things from that or something, or no, figure it out.
So if you think of a dialysis test, right, there's medical equipment that has to test that. How much does that medical equipment cost to manufacture?
Yeah.
And then how much does it cost for someone to administer the test? So that would be your cost of goods sold, right, is the equipment, how much it either costs the firm to buy the equipment, and also, even on back in the life cycle, how much did it cost to build that equipment?
Okay.
And then what did they sell it for?
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So you're want to start off from all the beginning and kind of put that life cycle together, because that's going to help you understand the entire market. And so again, you'll have a chance to interface with all of us on some of these things. Glenn?
I just wanted to touch on Patrick's point a little bit. It's really important to contact the CROs and figure out what your research is going to cost you and everything for the actual development costs.
Yep.
But it's important to note that that's not cost of goods sold.
It's very good. Yep.
Cost of goods sold is going to be your variable cost of actually producing the product, not the research that goes on before that.
So where does the research come into play? Who presented on that yesterday? Comes into the research plan, right? But does the research plan feed into your financials? Absolutely. Okay? So you ask about the runway of selling directly to a company versus selling to consumers, right? So what they'll want to see is to see your research plan and your research financials of how long that you're going to be marching through that. So let's say you win an NIH grant for $500,000 and you're expected to do these 5 things as part of that grant. You'll want to put in there, in your financials, that grant and also the burn rate of how you're utilizing that grant. That makes sense? Because then if Pfizer comes in and says, oh man, this is really cool what you're doing, we'd actually like to acquire this when you're done with this grant. Here's a couple things. We'll actually fund it a little bit more so you can hire a few more lab assistants, whatever it might be, to help you kind of move that forward, right?
Derek, if I could add, because I sense we're getting a lot of questions about this, and I think it's because you guys recognize that this will be a big piece of your financials. You're gonna need to know cost of goods sold, you're gonna have to have fairly accurate pricing, that's where your profitability is gonna come from, that's how you're gonna achieve break even after spending millions of dollars on the R&D plan. One of the ways in which you can get started, and where I think that the science students can help work with the business students, collaborate a little bit. If you look at your intellectual property, at the end of those patent applications, it'll very often have examples.
Yep.
Those examples may contain manufacturing information. It may be very crude because it's been done in a science laboratory, it's been done typically at small scale, but there are going to be compounds, reagents, processes that are in there that you can think about, okay, how do I scale this? And the engineer should be able to help with that as well. If I scale this up, how much of those reagents, those chemicals, those materials going to cost me? Is there some efficiency that's gained when I scale from milligrams that have been done in the lab to kilograms or metric tons in a manufacturing facility? If I have to add the labor costs, that's typically not average labor for rural Virginia. That's going to be engineers and scientists. You can go to websites like salary.com and other places and look and see what does it cost to hire a chemical engineer with 10 years experience to do this sort of thing. So you can build actually from your intellectual property and do a reasonably good job of getting a cost of goods sold that gets you at least in the ballpark. Does that make sense? Give you something to start with?
And again, remember, these are all assumptions, right? So, to Mark's point, we're not anticipating you getting to a very finite, specific number, but get in the ballpark, right? The last thing what we want to have happen is one of the judges is a owner of a dialysis testing clinic, and they spend $100,000 on equipment, and you come in and do a presentation and say that you're going to charge $250,000 for the equipment, and there's real no benefit or value proposition of one piece of equipment over the other, and so you kind of price yourself out of the market, right? So you have some of that initial research done. But here, simplify it, right? Cost of goods sold equals the fixed cost, the amount you pay, to buy what you sell. Okay? It does not include things like salespeople, floor space, advertising. Those are all variable costs, right? So focus on your fixed cost when you're focusing on your cost of goods sold. Glenn?
Do you have variable fixed costs?
No. Go ahead.
They would say with variable costs is more like labor. Like if like someone that you're paying to like produce something like on an hourly rate, like that's what it costs, like how long it takes to make the product. Like that's not necessarily a fixed cost.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Wait, how does floor space work?
You just don't need to, you don't have to include that in your cost of goods sold, because it's just with your fixed cost, floor space is variable,
Right,
because
absolutely.
as you grow it's variable, right?
Well, if I have a factory that has 10,000 square feet, I'm paying a fixed cost for that, no matter how much product I produce, right?
Yes, but what we're focused on
Or if I'm
is the
advertising-
amount you pay to buy, to buy what you sell. And so if you have, so again, I'm trying to simplify it for this exercise and test and administering to the test, right? So what I don't want you to get wrapped in on are the details of, we're gonna hire 5 salespeople, we're gonna have this kind of office space, we're gonna spend this much on advertising, because for this program, you're not gonna have enough information to pull that together. Right? So
Absolutely.
for this, I want you to focus on how much money, the true cost of goods sold of what you're gonna pay to buy on what you're gonna sell. So if it's a dialysis, I'm gonna keep picking on them because they're the only ones that know their intellectual property right now. If you know the cost of what it is to manufacture your testing equipment, then that is, you now can figure out what your cost of goods sold is.
Absolutely, but I thought cost of goods sold is a variable cost.
I have always taught it that it is a fixed cost, so, James?
It's variable to the extent that the more you sell, take the phone. The more phones you sell, the more COGS you'll have because your volume is going up. But it's fixed in relation to each phone. So each phone has the same number of, the same amount of RAM, motherboard, battery, lithium, cobalt, all that stuff. That's your COGS and shipping to packaging. So that's all fixed because it's the same for each phone. Does that make sense?
Everything else is variable. So to your point about floor space, yes, you have 10,000 square feet of space, but that is variable because if you start producing like Apple is right now and you have to expand your footprint, now all of a sudden it's a variable cost because you're expanding to hit volume, right? So when you focus on the cost of
either that's an operating expense.
Okay, so it's variable and fixed, not in the sense of the actual company accounting finances, but in the sense that as you expand, you have to.
Yeah, and we'll hit it with a couple of the other financial pieces. But again, keep it super simple. And I love James' analogy of the phone, right? Like, what are the components within your device that you have to have that are going to produce your product that you're going to sell, right? If it's a medical device, pharmaceutical, biologic, what is it that you're going to pay to buy what you sell, right? Those are the components that you have to figure out for your cost of goods sold. Okay? All right. We want gross margin. When you talk about margins, you'll hear this all the time in like Shark Tank, like we already talked about. So Mark Cuban will always say, you know what, the margins aren't high enough. I don't invest in that. What he's looking at is this, right? And so you have the gross margin is the unit sale, the cost of goods sold. So, going back to my pen example, if you sell a pen for $100 and the cost of goods sold is $40, you have a $60 net revenue, right? That is your margin. So 60% of the retail sell price is what you're looking at in terms of your margins, right? Again, don't need to get too detailed on that, but it's just good information to have. So you're looking at the net of that for your gross margins. Wow. All right, Tesla. Your break-even analysis. This is the most important thing, and I'll probably close on this and post the rest on Canvas. Okay, your break-even analysis. You're operating in the red for 5 years because you have a grant that you're expending, and your investors come to you and say, when are you going to break even? What is your break-even analysis? They want to know the moment that you kind of hit zero, and you're breaking even of what your cost of goods sold are and what your revenue is, right? So the point where revenue equals total cost associated with output of sales. How many widgets, and we're going to use Tesla Model 3 cars because I love them, do you have to sell in order to recoup all your fixed costs to startup and the fixed and variable costs associated with making each widget? Okay, so using that example, your break-even analysis equals X, and the X equals total fixed cost, the retail price of average variable cost. Okay? Assume that the total fixed cost, startup cost for the sake of computing break-even, okay, and the cost of goods sold. So here's the algorithm, right? And this is what you really, really highly recommend you having something like this in your mind. You don't necessarily need to build a slide for this in your presentation. But Tesla Model 3 fixed costs, research and development. So you have your research plan, so you know how much money you're putting into research and development. And that's $3 billion for Tesla. Cost to produce each new Model 3, cost of goods sold, is $25,000. The retail price of a Model 3 is starting price of $35,000. And they build their break-even analysis on the lowest good that they're selling, right? So Model 3s can get up to over $100,000 depending what features, remember I talked about features and benefits yesterday, depending on what features you add to it. But they're gonna build their break even on the lowest model that they provide. So what is Tesla's break even quantity? It's pretty big. So you take 3 billion by 35,000 minus 25,000, so 3 billion divided by 10, they have to sell 300,000 units to break even. Okay? Tesla breaks even on the Model 3 when they sell $300,000 or 300,000 units. Okay? Break even figure, Model 3, retail price, $10.5 billion in sales is what their sales forecasting is. Okay? That is what investors want to see, is you equating a lot of these pieces. Again, keep it super simple. Okay, here's what's awesome about Tesla. On pre-order, they did 276,000 on pre-order. $10 billion in future revenue. And they did that within a month of pre-orders. It's a pretty cool business model. And people, 276,000 people bought those on pre-order, and it didn't ship for another 18 to 24 months. Oh no, that was within 72 hours. There you go. All right. So, break-even analysis. Can you all build one right now? No. Lots of information you need. All right, so what I highly encourage each team to do is take this, reverse engineer it, break it down into components, and figure out exactly the types of information that you need. Right? Break it down into individual components and build a spreadsheet so you know what are your costs of goods sold, how much are our competitors selling for, and start building out these models so that you can start building out a little bit of forecast, right? Mark said this earlier, and I really want to reiterate this. If you compartmentalize your teams, and the scientists do the science stuff, and the engineers do the engineering stuff, the business team does business stuff, and you all can't speak to this, it's going to be really difficult for you to compete against others. Come together so that you can all speak to this at least at an elementary level, right? And again, it's super important information to know and understand. What questions do we have on break-even analysis? Patrick?
Are we going to be expected to present like the judges with all of our background data?
I think it's always wise, and we'll talk about it next week as you get this information and prepare you for your pitch presentations on what needs to be included. I'm a big fan of having an appendix of slides. So you build it so your team has that information. So if you need to refer to it at any time, you can. But I would say that specifically for the financials, what you're looking for is really what we're going through right now, up to a break-even analysis and at least some assumptions that you can, that you can play with related to this.
Yeah, just to add to that, remember you've only got 7 minutes.
That's right.
If you bore the judges with spreadsheets, I can guarantee you're going to lose.
You're toast.
So you need to be ready because there's going to be 5 minutes of questions. The judges may come after you, with details like this. So it's like you're talking about the exciting stuff, but you've got the boring stuff in the background just in case.
And I would warn the scientists and engineers, you can do the same thing on the technology. You go into too much detail on the technology, and you'll bore the judges. Last night I posted a whole page of videos that you all should go and watch, many of them. There's a lot there, so I don't expect everybody to watch all of them. But you have to have the right balance. I would expect, just from doing these things and seeing them, is that a lot of that will come out in Q&A, not necessarily in your pitch. So expect that those questions will come. If you do a good job with your pitch, you will get a lot of questions, more questions than time will allow, and we'll have to cut the judges off. And you know that you're doing a good job, you did a good job, you nailed it, and they really understand. Also, if the questions are the type where they're drilling down on your assumptions, you can also assume that they really got it and they understand. So that's where some of that stuff will come out. What's the background or the backup to those numbers? Those are in your assumptions, and as Derek said, you know, he'll look at just the assumption page. If you've done a good job, you'll see a judge kind of drilling down on your assumptions, and then you should say to yourself, yeah, we really nailed that.
That's exactly right. And again, have an appendix of this information so that if you do get a question and you have it, you know, on slide 5 of your appendix, you can quickly refer to it, right? So for the sake of this program, we're really going to focus on getting you to the break-even analysis. Now, I have some other information in here related to income statement and building out a pro forma. And, you know, really quickly, what that means is you're going to have net sales, cost of sales, and operating expenses, which goes back to the question that Glenn had. And so when you put together a pro forma, you're going to want to integrate all of these into your data and the information that you have related to your company, right? And again, it's a forecast, so it's not immediate. It's estimating. Here's what we think that's going to be. And one thing that I'm sure James says all the time to companies is there's always more than what you estimate. So, all right. Balance sheet, we're not going to go into that. You guys can refer to it if you need to. And then statement of cash flows. So, something that you might want to look at building is something like this, right? So if you know how much R&D costs you're going to have and how many months you're going to be operating in the red, and show us when you're going to get to a break-even analysis, I think that's going to satisfy what our judges want to see. But remember, you're going to want to do that over a 12-month period of time, monthly, and then years, 2 through 4, you can start operating in a little bit more of like a quarterly fashion, if that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. You can see this one's all monthly. You can keep it that way as well, just depending on what runway you guys want to tackle. I typically encourage, and I like James' thoughts on this as well, I typically encourage at least a 2-year pro forma. What would you say?
I was going to say 3.
There you go.
Referring to statements, not balance sheet.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to turn the time over to James. There's so much more that we could go into this. So if you're utterly confused about financials and what you need for that, schedule time with me, and I can go over some of that stuff with you. But again, make sure that you're working towards getting those early numbers of cost of goods sold, and that you're making some good assumptions in terms of
Guys, while they're switching out, and before Rob introduces James, let me just give you a couple places to go and get some hopefully helpful information. There is an organization called the Association of University Technology Managers, AUTM, AUTM. Google that, go to their website. They have a ton of information. Things to look for in particular that relate to the financials, that's a little bit more biotech, medtech relevant. There are 2 spreadsheets on that website. So if you just Google these 2 spreadsheet names, it'll take you to the Autumn site. If you combine Autumn and
you should.
ValBio
I'm just saying,
2000, VALBIO 2000, and Valuate. Those are 2 already built Excel spreadsheets that do a lot of this stuff. And they can be very complicated, I'll warn you. ValBio 2000 is very complicated, lots of embedded formulas. If you've got somebody who really loves spreadsheets and really loves Excel, turn loose with that. And you can do some of this stuff because it'll have a template that has slots for filling in things like cost of goods sold, Some of them even go to the extent of giving you a bit of information about not only break-even analysis, but also valuation of the company. So a projected, future value of the company if you're looking at an exit strategy and maybe what the company might be able to be acquired for. So ValBio 2000, Valuate, and AUTM. Google those. If you're having trouble finding them, let me know, but I'll probably end up posting those Excel spreadsheets. Okay, but I caution, they can be very complicated.
Okay, I also want to mention a couple of things before I introduce James. Derek mentioned something quite important during his talk, grants. Investors love grants because it means that somebody else is spending money on your technology that they're not spending. Write this down. The NIH produces small business grants. They're mandated by law to issue these small business grants. Also the DoD and the National Science Foundation. They're called SBIRs and STTRs. So take a look at those. Some of the science students may be familiar with these mechanisms, so they could be helpful, but just keep that in mind. Money from grant applications that develop your technology could be very valuable. The second thing to mention is we're going to be joined by the team mentors over the next 15 minutes or so, and as indicated in the information that you guys have been given, you're going to divide up into your teams and have a meet and greet with your mentors. Derek's laid on some box lunches for you to enjoy. We can't actually eat it in here. We'll just move out to the cafeteria and the atrium area, so find yourself somewhere comfortable to gather and sit down and chat with each other and your mentors. We have a couple arrived already. Francis Farrell from Fralin Clinic is here, and Ed Champion from LT Technologies is here. Also, another resource, you may have seen the young man coming on the car.
This is a motley crew of mentors you have.
Yeah, we've got real pirates for you. Ryan left his parrot behind. Ryan suffered a stingray injury, so it was kind of exciting. He had surgery on his foot.
I don't know, exciting is how I would describe it.
Yeah, well, so Ryan is the TA for this particular class in the TBMH program. He's also a resource that you can use. He's been through this process before, so he's a second year TBMH student, so he went through not the same process you're undergoing at the moment, but a similar process last year. He's a good guy, and a good source of information, so use it if you can. Okay, so this is Mr. James Ramey. James is principal at Midland Capital, a Washington, D.C. based venture capital firm. And he's also the managing director of the VTC Innovation Fund, which is a fund contributed to by the Fralin Clinic, Virginia Tech, that I guess is in the range of, what, $12 to $15 million? $15 million. His remit is to invest in local tech companies. So it's my pleasure to introduce James and to let him teach you a little bit about the world of tech investment.
Thanks, Rob. So yeah, I'll just start real quick with a quick, Rob did a good introduction, but just a little bit about my background and my fund's background. So yeah, like Rob mentioned, our investors are Virginia Tech and Fralin Clinic. We are a very traditional venture capital fund. We do early stage life science and tech investments throughout the state of Virginia, and we're trying to focus at least part of the portfolio on sort of a radius of Roanoke plus 150 miles. We're trying to weight the portfolio 60% life science and 40% tech. Within life science, we really like devices and therapeutics. Within tech, we really like B2B SaaS, as well as food and ag. My background, started my career in law, moved into venture capital, then investment banking, and now back into venture capital. So I've done deals from every imaginable side of the table, short of the, maybe the janitor who cleans the table afterward. But even then, as an associate attorney, I did a lot of that. So, know a lot about doing deals in a lot of different sectors. Quick question, does anybody know what an investment banker actually does? I'll call on you if you don't answer. Green sweatshirt, investment banker, what do they do? All right, investment bankers, wait, you know?
They make investments for returns?
No. No. Investment bankers, it's a very misleading name, so it's understandable. Investment bankers don't actually invest money. They never touch money. All they do is sell and raise money for companies. They're a realtor for companies. So I think my background lends itself to this lecture because I've invested in companies. I've also tried to, snooker investors into investing in companies. So that's what you guys are doing here, right? You're pitching potential investors to invest in your company. So you need to have both the stake and the sizzle, and I'll touch on what both of those mean later. But it needs to be technical enough to make it seem like you know what you're talking about, but it needs to be sort of sexy enough to get people excited. All right, venture capitalists are people just like you. They need to be excited. They need to feel as though they're going to make a lot of money from their investment, and I'll walk through kind of how to do that. First, I want to give a little background on just sort of how companies raise money and sort of the life cycle of a company. So most of your companies, I think, would be sort of in this grant and friends and family range, as well as the next range that I'll touch on. But like Rob said, there's multiple grants: STTR, SBIR, DOD, NIH. States have lots of grants. Foundations, universities, you name it. Just when I think I know every grant, I learn about a new one. So, exhaust your research. Make sure you do a ton of research on the free money that's out there. Free money is great, like Rob said, not only because it saves me as an investor money, it also saves you from diluting yourself. So if you, a life science company, you may need to raise $70 to $100 million by the end of the day to get a product to market. If you can front load 3 to 4 million of that in grants, you end up owning a lot more of your company at the end of the day, because you give away, the earlier you raise money, the more of the company you're typically giving away. Uses of grant funding is, I think, a lot of what you're talking about now. It's building out your foundational research. It's building out your team, setting up your legal structure, filing patents, all that kind of stuff. It's expensive, and it's not terribly accretive from a revenue standpoint. So the more free money you can get for that, the better. The next step, and usually in conjunction with grants, because grants often require matching capital, is friends, family, and fools. I didn't put fools in the slide, but you're typically looking at 100,000 to maybe $1.5 million from non-institutional investors, rich people in the community, angel networks, stuff like that. The use of capital is pretty similar to grants, but like I said, you can also use it to match grants. Pitch contests is another way that early stage companies raise a lot of money. So think of this as sort of a crash course in future entrepreneurship. A lot of tech companies will operate their first year just flying around or driving around the country doing pitch contests. 20 grand here, 50 grand here. But you add it all together, number one, you get really good at pitching. Number two, you're building a network of people who can invest. Number three, once again, free money. One example of that in this ecosystem is a company called Park and Diamond. They make a kind of foldable helmet. What was that? You guys know that? You what? What was your company? So anyway, Park and Diamond has basically funded themselves with pitch contests. Now the real money just walked in the room. So don't be afraid of pitch contests. Also, I forgot to mention, I'm going to fly through some of these and kind of concentrate on the meat of what I think you're going to be graded on. So interrupt me at any time, all right? All right, next stage, seed funding. Some of you are sort of here too. None of this is steps. It's all very organic. It's all sort of jumbled together. Seed funding generally ranges from $250,000 to $1.5 million, sometimes higher. I consider our fund to be a late seed and early Series A fund, so we're typically writing checks from $500,000 to $2 million, but participating in larger rounds, syndicated deals. So, seed, all of these are very loose definitions. I'm not going to burn too many calories on this, other than as part of your deck, you should have an understanding. I don't know about a slide, but an understanding of how much money it's going to take for you to get to an exit. So in order to do that, you need to know, right now I'm raising, I'm trying to win a pitch contest, but in the future I'm going to need X dollars in my Series A round. I'm going to need X dollars in my Series B round, onward and onward. So that the people judging the contest can know how much capital you're going to need before you can achieve an exit. Anybody know what exit means? Does everybody know what exit means? You shook your head. Shouldn't have done that. All right, what is it?
It's either going public or selling your company to
Good. I think of it this way. As an investor, I don't want to marry you. I just want to move in for a few years. All right? So I need to get a return on my capital within 3 to 7 years of my investment. So you need, when you're building your deck, to paint that picture for me. All right? None of us want to be in any of these businesses forever. We all want to cash out at some day. So you need to always think about that end game as you're building the deck. Think about the end. All right, any questions on these stages? Like I said, I know I'm flying through it. Okay, what are investors looking for? No matter the sector, no matter the investor, whether it's the rich guy down the street, or whether it's a foundation, or whether it's Atlas Capital, whoever, pick your poison, Sequoia. They're all looking for the same exact thing in every single company, and it's these factors up here. Experienced management team. We call it been there, done that people. So preferably people who have started and sold a company within that sector, which is probably none of you, which is okay. You just need to try to find a way to sort of build your team up in your deck. So if your team is a mix of really smart engineers and business people, kind of everything in between, try to highlight your experience to make it applicable to your company. And once again, this is sales, all right? This isn't a lecture, this isn't a research paper, this is sales. You're selling yourself, you're selling your company. So you kind of need to BS a little bit. We're all expecting it as judges, but that's part of being an entrepreneur. Part of being an entrepreneur is always selling yourself, always selling your company. So don't lie, but make yourself a little better than you are. It's like Shaq. Shaq's probably 7 feet tall, maybe 6'11", but he put 7'1". Nobody's going to measure Shaq. Same with you. Demonstrated traction, data, or results. This is another thing everybody's looking for, and it's a perpetually moving bar. It's so frustrating for entrepreneurs, I'm sure, because you can always have more traction. So all of you are going to be very early stage, obviously you're not going to have any sales to point to or anything like that. So you need to point towards How many companies here are life science companies? I heard dialysis, that's life science.
Should be all.
They're all life science, okay, great. His hand's broken, is everybody else's? Just kidding. All right, so life science companies. So the traction you can point to is animal data, bench data, studies that are published, et cetera, et cetera. So it's traction in that sense means I've proven that this product works. I've proven that this product doesn't kill the animals. Does that make sense? Now, if it's tech, your traction is a little different. Your traction is usually sales. But if everybody's life science, I'm just going to concentrate on life science. Good. All right. That makes my life much easier. The next thing everybody's looking for, and I would say this is one of the most important parts, especially if you don't have a team to point to, you really need to point to this. Large addressable market. Now, I came in late in Derek's lecture, but he was talking about top-down, bottom-up analysis. The first variable in that is the size of the market. And so you need to think about a real market. Not the problem is there's a lot of kind of BS markets out there. People. I invest in life science companies, so I'm often dealing with, well, the world population is X billion, and X percent of those billion, have this ailment, and so if I can get 0.5% of the entire world, we're all going to retire happy. That's not really how it works. So you need to get a very focused addressable market, but once again, it's sales. So you focus, figure out what the real addressable market is, and then figure out how much you can kind of beef that up. So when you're building an addressable market for a life science company, how do you think you build it? What are the variables that go into defining what your addressable market is? I'm gonna call on some of you. Yes. No, you already went. You.
Maybe the population that can actually afford it, or whatever.
Population meaning number of patients?
Yeah, patients or like the patients that have that whatever illness or anything that
Good.
can afford it.
That's right. What else? What else goes into it?
The geographic distribution of production of product versus distribution of product.
Yeah, but most of these products, and these aren't really, they're not going to spoil. You're not shipping fruit. You don't have to worry about, typically, you don't have to worry about spoilage. So that's a good thought, but not for life science. Unless you guys are, shipping really nasty, volatile, bugs across the country. What else? So we've got number of patients. What else? And remember, that'll give you a hint. I'm trying to make money.
I don't know if this would factor into just better, so it's later on access to.
Yep. So, but that's later. So your first step is if there's nothing else out there, sort of blue ocean, how much water is in the ocean? And then you start kind of taking buckets out. So you're on the right track. Patients, number of patients. Well, let me ask you this. If there's 1 million patients, but it's only $1 per treatment, that's not that much money, right? That's $1 million. So you need to know how much money is typically spent per treatment, per patient, and how many treatments those patients typically receive. So if you look at, does anybody know what the #1 selling drug in the history of humanity is? Since they've been tracking such things. Please. Humira. And the reason is it's addressing very large patient populations, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and starting to branch out into basically any autoimmune inflammatory disorder.
Already, 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. So that's #1, lots of patients. #2, you never get better. Never. all you're doing is just basically treating the symptom. It just reduces inflammation. You go off the drug, the inflammation comes back. So you're constantly being treated. Number three, it's expensive. So it's, X number of dollars per treatment, per patient, in perpetuity, per month. So that really adds up. So when you're thinking about your market, think about that. Cost per treatment, number of patients, number of treatments per patient. Just put that in a slide, make it nice and easy. Another important thing, I don't know if you're going to need to do it for this, but tell me guys if I'm wrong, is the payer landscape. Very few patients pay for their own drugs, or their own devices, or their own treatments. Typically it's insurance companies. So you want to highlight existing insurance codes. I would personally never do a deal if there wasn't an existing reimbursement code. So try to find one for whatever your company is.
And just real quick, James, on that, something that we've touched on with feasibility, research plan, regulatory, and then even today the financials, what you look at is that's your ecosystem, right? Each one of those components need to be addressed and answered in your pitches and in your presentation. So you need to know those different components to really explain and describe the ecosystem from everything from your research plan to your manufacturing to your to the pricing and who's paying for that good, right? So know your ecosystem. Again, you have to do it in a really short period of time.
Yeah, don't put the code, just say existing codes or currently reimbursed by insurance, something like that. Executable business model. This is very important, and I think it's often overlooked. So investors like simple things that make sense. There's sort of already a path out there. Nobody likes to blaze a new path. So just in this pitch, just paint a picture for a very easy road for investors. If it's a drug, think about a really complicated treatment. Some of these new CAR T therapies. You're extracting blood from a patient, you ship it across the country, magic occurs, you ship it back. That's a complicated business model. There's a lot of money to be made there, but that would give some investors indigestion versus I give the patient a pill, the patient goes home, takes the pill. So the more you can simplify it, the less complicated the business model, the more believable it is to investors. So if you have a really complicated system, if you have a really complicated product you're selling, it's on you as a salesperson to simplify that for the investors. Unmet need. This applies in tech, this applies in life science. Once again, it's overlooked. Do not assume if you build it, they will come. Because I won't be assuming that, and none of the other judges will either. So you have to show there's a real problem here. People are sick, people are dying, people are in significant pain, people are going in for surgery. Once again, Humira. People love to rag on Humira. If there was no Humira, people would have to go in and get pieces of their intestines cut out. That's a serious surgery. Long recovery time. And even with the surgery, you're still not better. So paint that kind of picture. Put that ick factor in the investor's mind. People are dying, we are saving lives here. All right, at the end of the day, that's what life science is all about. As much as I like to talk about making money, we're saving lives. And that's the sort of emotional connection you need to try to make with your investors. I'm gonna come back to tangible exit pathways. I'm gonna hit on innovative tech and IP. So Ford, Kemper touched on it earlier. Once again, make sure you need an entire slide on here's my tech, here's my IP, here's what I do that nobody else can do. I'll give a little bit more detail on that later. And then finally, tangible exit pathways. What is the end game? IPO should really be your last exit, not your first. IPOs are a pain, they're expensive. You pay the lawyers as much as you end up making off the IPO. So have IPO on there, make sure everybody knows it's an option, But your first option should be a merger or acquisition with a larger company in the space. And I like to see a slide. Exit pathways, merger or acquisition, and then you put the logos of the big players in that space. So if it's dialysis, well, what else is there? I hate dialysis. What else is there? Anybody else have a company? What else is there besides dialysis?
Well, only 2 teams have chosen their intellectual property. The other team that has chosen their intellectual property may not want to go to this place.
Oh, this is one of those. Okay, all right.
I picked out one team that had revealed it.
All right, so I'll use dialysis then. So your large players in the space is probably going to be Baxalta, DaVita, and a few other of those large dialysis companies. Put their logos on the slide and try to point to some sales some acquisitions that they've made. So X company bought X company for X dollars just a few years ago. Then I look at that and say, oh wow, X company might buy this company for those many dollars. Make it that simple. If there are some big IPOs in the space, put on there, X million dollar IPO. But like I said, hit on M&A. And by the way, getting back to the investment bankers, that's what investment bankers do. They sell companies to other companies, mergers and acquisitions. One thing, since it's life science, inflection points, very important. All right, it's all about steps, and investors want their money to get the company to the next step. So your step right now is, I assume building out IP, proof of concept, sort of minimum viable product. After you have your minimum viable product, you're then going to do preclinical studies, file an IND or an NDA, if it's a device. So I want to know that how much capital do you need to get to that next step? How much capital do you need to get to the step after that? Because at each step, your valuation goes up. It does you and I no good if the money only gets you halfway to the next step, because then you're going to have to raise money, and we're all going to get crammed down. So think entirely about inflection points, and I would even have a timeline slide where you map out the entire life of the company. Exit, start, here's where I am, and then these are the steps, these are the inflection points, and this is how much money it takes for me to get to each one. Once again, first of all, if any of you know of a company that checks all these boxes up here, please give me a call, because I would like to make an investment in it. Very few companies have all of this. So you need to, number one, accept it, don't pretend you have all of it, and then just have a plan in place and talk to it on how you're going to fill in those boxes. So if you don't have a team, we're going to hire a been there, done that CEO, or we're going to hire regulatory people, or we think we have the team, but we need money to build out our tech and IP. Just think about filling in your weaknesses. These are all the things you need. Think about how you're going to fill them in. And remember that the financials are the conclusion. So all your slides should be building to the financials, but those financials should already be made up in my mind by the time you get to them. So you should be painting a picture of how big this opportunity can be, so that the financials are just reinforcing my pre-existing belief on the success that this company can have. All right, now financials are important, very important to have, financials that make sense and are backed up by appendix slides that have a lot of detail, but the financials are the conclusion. All right, you shouldn't have to walk me through line by line of the financials. I should get it by the time I get to it, and I should just be able to look at them and be like, okay, it makes sense. Maybe ask a couple questions on your assumptions. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay. By the way, when you're building a deck, make it graphical like this, but don't use the same color like I do. It begins to be a bit much. All right, so Guy Kawasaki. I have no idea what Guy Kawasaki does, but he is sort of a messiah-type figure in the startup world. I think he's a chief evangelist for Google. I don't even know what that means. But anyway, he's got some good rules, and I've made some sort of tweaks to them. Normal pitch. This is not a normal pitch, this is a pitch contest. Normal pitch, 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. That's really hard. I know it sounds easy. You're a student. You're used to seeing. I need to write a 50-page paper. I'm telling you, it's harder to do less than it is to do more, because that means each word needs to be perfectly tailored. Each graphic needs to be perfectly tailored so that you can get your point across with minimal words, and you need to be able to talk to it cleanly. All right. So one easy way to do it, I showed it on this slide. Oh yeah. This. See what I did? I just said normal pitch. So you could write it. You could say normal pitch equals, or you can do it graphically. Normal pitch, arrow, equal sign, something like that. Boom, boom, boom. That makes it much easier than if I had written a paragraph on the slide, right? That's how your whole thing should be. If you have paragraphs, I'm going to hammer you. Mentally. I won't do it in public. All right. So, and look, I didn't even follow my own advice in some of these, right? You don't want any more words than this. Okay? All right, so, typical deck. Title slide. All of you, have you guys learned about what an elevator pitch is? Running a rich guy in the elevator, oh, my company does this. First of all, don't talk to random people in elevators, but if you do, your title slide should start with your elevator pitch, okay? Just like I did at the beginning of the slide. I'm James Rainey, Principal and Fund Manager at Enablement Capital's VTC Innovation Fund. We're a $15 million VC fund that invests in early and growth stage life science and tech companies. Now, all of you know who I am, and all of you know what I do. I could leave the room, you'd know what I do. You need to do the same thing with your title slide, okay? As this goes on, people pay less and less attention. So you need to make this really hit and be really clean, really easy to digest, okay? We're a medical device company in the dialysis space. This is what we do. This is why we're better than everybody else. Very clean, very easy, okay? The next thing, let me take a step back. I hit on it earlier. Human nature. Human nature, human nature, human nature, okay? Investors, VCs, we're all just people. We may be extremely smart and good looking, we're all just people, okay? And so sell to people, all right? What do people like? What excites people, all right? So keep that in mind. Yes, there needs to be some science. Yes, there needs to be some details, but it needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging, and it needs to get people excited. I would suggest practicing your pitch on people who are not in the class. Your roommate, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. Call them in and sit them down for the pitch and tell them to be honest with you. Did this get you excited? If it didn't, go back to the drawing board. Because think about it, we're judges, we're going to listen to however many of these. Even there's left brain, right brain. The science side of my brain might be like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. But if you're a boring mechanism of action, I'm not going to be as excited about the person who's up there being like, X $1 million was spent on this space last year. Our drug is better. These patients are in big trouble, and we're going to save them. That sort of clean, engaging, exciting pitch is what wins these pitch competitions. Okay? It's called the sizzle. You need the steak, you need the sizzle. You're at a restaurant, you get a cold steak, you're not going to be happy, okay? But if somebody brings it out and it's still sizzling, it's exciting. It could taste like a hockey puck, but there's going to be a moment when you're like, oh man, this is going to be a good steak. That's what you have to do, okay? So, how do you do that? Major problem. Once again, the Humira example. Major problem. People are having to go into surgery. People are in a ton of pain. People spend a ton of money. If you have an anti-inflammatory, you should also say, the current standard of care is Humira, and Humira kills people. Think about that. The best drug in the space, if you have an underlying infection, you will die taking Humira. And it still made this much money. Our drug is just as good as Humira, and it won't kill you. That's a very compelling argument for an investor, and everybody can get that. All right? If a teenager doesn't get what you're saying and can't get excited about it, you're not doing the pitch good enough. All right? Think about getting teenagers excited. So, unmet need. There's a problem. It's not currently being served. Here's how much money is being spent. Okay? That's your first slide. Make it graphical. Maybe put like some newspaper clipping type, you know, that kind of thing. Next is basically sort of a more detailed, think of it as like an arrow. It goes from opportunity to market. Here you're going to give much more detail on the size of your market, but once again, keep it engaging, keep it exciting, and then growth. Most markets are growing, but you want to hit on that. X number of patients per year, X number of dollars spent. As baby boomers get older, they need more dialysis, et cetera, et cetera. Growth in diabetes, you know, stuff like that. Okay? Next, so you've set out the problem. You've set out the market. There's a big problem. There's a lot of people spending money fixing this problem. Here's how we fix it. This is what we do to help patients. This is how we do it. Think of this as your elevator pitch on steroids. Okay? How you fix it, why people will pay for it. They'll only pay for it if it works better, if it's safer, or if it's cheaper. You normally only need 2 of those 3. Typically, you can't have all 3. You can hit on 2 of those 3. You know, that's a home run. Really. It's cheaper, it works better, or it works better, it's safer, or it's cheaper and it's safer. Okay? Next, underlying magic. I stole that from Guy Kawasaki. I wish I'd come up with that. And then I stole this from Warren Buffett. So, your IP, your special sauce. It's one slide. Here's the patent. You know, here's the patent pipeline. Here's the moat. This is how we protect our product. This is why James Ramey can't just come and build a competitive product. This is why I can't just listen to your pitch and be like, yeah, I think I can do better. All right? The protection, the moat. Does everybody know who Warren Buffett is? Good. All right. Moat. So, you've laid out the problem, you've laid out the market, you've laid out the solution, you've laid out why you do it best. Now we get a little bit more into the weeds. Business model and go to market. How will you make money? We sell to doctors, we sell to hospitals, we sell direct to patients, etc. What is your business model? How does money flow from one person into your pocket? That simple, all right? How will you reach your customer? If it's Tesla, how does Tesla reach its customers? Does anybody know? Have you ever seen a Tesla commercial? Think about that. I've never seen one either. Yet everybody knows what it is. They reach their customers through word of mouth, through getting the market excited, through publications. It's not that different from drug and device sales. Okay? At some point, yes, you have your advertising to customers on TV, but in the beginning, you're at trade shows, you're publishing papers, you know, all the stuff so that it's doctors, right? Doctors sell drugs, doctors sell devices. If you can't convince the doctor that the drug works best, they're never going to prescribe it to their patient. How do doctors get excited about stuff? Derek gets excited about stuff by reading about it. Derek goes out and evangelizes about the Tesla. Doctors do the same thing. They'll read a paper. Oh man, this drug, this is a good drug.
Then they prescribe it to the patients, they talk to other doctors look for it, et cetera, et cetera. So think about how you're going to penetrate the market. And you can't just say, I'm just going to buy a bunch of ads on Facebook. All right? Nobody on Facebook is looking for drugs. Well, depends on the drug. So, explain how you'll reach your customer, and once again, really think about it, okay? By the way, all this stuff, so this is all qualitative with a mix of quantitative. So it's a qualitative slide with quantitative facts. All this stuff is building into the financial model that Derek was talking about. All right, so how you reach your customer, once you figure out the story behind how you reach your customer, you can then understand the numbers and put that in your model. Okay? Marketing, all that stuff, by the way, is operating expenses, not costs. But so think about it that way. It becomes much easier. If you think about the story first, the numbers become much easier. All right? So you don't start with numbers, you start with story, you finish with numbers. Here's an important thing. Get into the market without having to raise too much money. Once again, Tesla, they spend a lot of money on trying to build Model 3s. They don't spend much money on advertising. Therefore, their break even is that much lower at the end of the day. Okay? Now, if you guys all had really, also don't copy this directly. I mean, this stuff right here, I wouldn't mess with that. But if you have a really good management team, move it up here. All right? Move your slides around. You have people's attention more in the beginning than you do in the middle. Okay? So start strong, finish strong, hide your weaknesses in the middle. So you can play around with all these to a certain extent. For most of you, since you're not going to have sort of been there, done that management teams, highlight your strengths, you all have them, mitigate your weaknesses, and then identify any key hires. If we had this money, this is what we would do. All right, next. Once again, this is think of it like a conclusion, your financials. All right? 1 or 2 slides, if that. If you can get it in one, that would be great. So you have a few bullet points on the left, you have a graph on the right. Typically, it's just an income statement. Your first few years is going to be, if it's all life science, are any of these companies going to have to do pre-market approvals, or are they all? Yeah.
Some probably will.
Okay. So if you have a company that requires a pre-market approval, you're going to need to do a longer projection. Okay, because you're going to have, 2 to 5 years of nothing but losses because you're paying for clinical trials. But then after that, hockey stick, big time. Everybody know what a hockey stick is? In the context of business, not. Yeah? Okay. I once I used to do deals with a curmudgeon, very rich curmudgeon, who in a pitch, entrepreneur was like, here's our hockey stick slide. And the guy interrupts him and he goes, in my experience, the bottom of the hockey stick is the grip, and the front or in the end of the hockey stick slide is the part that you get rammed with when the company misses its expectations. So have the hockey stick, but just remember, we're going to discount it in our own minds, so you need to back it up. So what I would do is I would have right side of the slide is your income statement, break even, all that stuff. Try to build it in one graph. So you have your losses in the beginning, like that slide Derek showed you. Losses in the beginning, break even, profits. And don't forget about EBITDA. Are we doing EBITDA on this? Or? Yeah. EBITDA is the single most important statistic from a financial standpoint. Do you not? Who knows what EBITDA is? You look confused. You're scared. Nobody knows what EBITDA is.
We haven't talked about it specifically.
Okay. Yes.
Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization.
Great. And why is that important?
Because all that stuff can be mitigated in different ways.
Yeah. Very good. All right. So think about it this way. It's your revenue minus your COGS minus your operating expenses. So it's the widget whatever it costs me to build the widget, whatever it costs me to support the building of the widget and the selling of the widget. And then that's how much real money is available at the end of the day. Taxes can be avoided, debt can be sort of avoided, like all that stuff, taxes, debt, amortization, it's all sort of variable. So it's, at its core, this is the amount of company this cash could generate if we had really good slick accountants, is basically the EBITDA. So I would really highlight your EBITDA. And there should be a point when your EBITDA break even, okay? I don't care about net income. I only care about EBITDA. And companies that are bought or sold are sold on EBITDA. Sometimes they're sold on revenue as well.
And the calculation that James is talking about is going to be on the slides that we'll post this afternoon. So you'll see the way that you can calculate EBITDA and how you find that information within your specific domains and industries.
All right. I like a 3-year projection. For life science companies, you need to do longer though, because like I said, if you just did 3 years, it would just be like loss, loss, loss. You know, so you might need to do a much longer projection. Everybody looking at it should know, you know, it's kind of finger to the wind. So you should have a really clear picture on your losses, those loss years, how much it's going to cost to get this product to market. And then when you get to market, that's when you get into your top-down and bottom-up analysis. All right, so the market research you've done should plug right into that, and you just need to back it up with your assumptions. X patients, X dollars, X number of treatments per patient per year. That's our revenue. Okay? Include your key metrics. Bullets, make them pretty like this. Okay? Key metrics. What is the core of what drives this company's financial performance? Distill that into 2 or 3 bullets and put a pretty box around them. All right. Your next slide should be the exit landscape. I touched on it earlier. Who's buying? How much are they paying? Have a list of your potential acquirers and then other exit avenues. Typically, it's going to be either IPO, but there are also some companies that kick off a lot of cash. So a dialysis center, that is a cash cow. Those things just mint money. And so the investors can make money through a dividend. So if you have a company like that, a cash cow, not going to be a really sexy multiple, but it can kick off a lot of cash, put that. And then finally, I like a current status slide. That timeline I mentioned earlier. The inflection points. Here's where we will be at the end. Here's what it's going to take us to get there. Here's where we are right now. Here's where your money gets us. That's the most important slide. Because hopefully you've done a great job selling me on all this. I'm sold. I need to be sold by the time you get to your financials. All right? And then this is just sort of a gut check. Make sense? How much time do I have left? None. All right. The rest of this stuff you don't really need. This is just sort of deal basics. You know, we're not going to be like negotiating deals. It's going to be term sheets. So just keep this. It's worth something someday to you, hopefully. Here's kind of how a typical deal works. This is how most startups actually operate. And there's my contact information. Are we allowed to do like office hours or anything like that? So yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm in Blacksburg a couple days a week. I'm here a couple days a week.
So we'll post James' email and actually see you
Okay, another couple things that people are waiting for. Mentors and lunch. Got to get the right adapter here. So I've got the slide with the mentor assignments on it. Even the mentors who are here don't know what team they're getting on. So you guys are going to have to kind of identify yourself by team number like we did yesterday. Track down your mentor and get connected. But one brief announcement that I want to mention If you are thinking, what the hell did I get myself into? Man, this is going to be a lot of work. Here's a little extra incentive. I've just been told that the prize money has been augmented by another $2,500. So if that doesn't get you going, I don't know what will. We'll continue to see if we can raise some additional money, so if it happens to go up again, I'll let you all know. All right, so here are the mentor assignments. Break into your teams and identify yourselves. Let's try to do what we did yesterday. Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, Team 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That way the mentors who can come to you guys, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.